Hello and welcome to MidEast In Depth, part of Levant TV's Press Reviews. Levitt Fromer-Wexler Fellow and Director of the Washington Institute's Stein program on counter-terrorism and intelligence writes an article in the Washington Institute looking at the situation of Hezbollah. Levitt starts by saying that Hezbollah wants the world to know it still wants death to Israel. It's just really busy right now, as Iranian and the P5+1 negotiators met in Vienna against a looming deadline and prospects for a deal over Tehran's nuclear program seemed increasingly dim. Iran's primary militant proxy, Lebanese Hezbollah, chimed in with news of its own. In an interview with Iran's Tansim news agency, Hezbollah Deputy Chief Naim Qassem announced that with Iran's help, the group had acquired advanced Iranian missiles with pinpoint accuracy that it could use in any future war on Israel. In other words, should negotiations fail, Israel should think twice before carrying out a military strike against Iran's nuclear facilities. Levitt believes, in case it wasn't already clear, Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah wants anyone who's listening to know this. Hezbollah stands fully prepared to fight Israel, despite the group's deep involvement in an entirely different battle in Syria. Levitt then goes on about Hezbollah targeting Western interests even far from Lebanon. He then concludes, saying there's one looming unknown in the modern geopolitical environment, though that could rapidly reshape and refocus Hezbollah's strategy. He says if Israeli warplanes do at some point strike Iranian nuclear facilities, all bets are off. Hezbollah will surely shoot at least some of those pinpoint rockets at Israeli critical infrastructure, even as it continues to pick up the pace of Peru-style operations abroad. Interesting illustration of Hezbollah's stances and its desire to maintain the status quo on the Lebanese-Israeli border. That said, Levitt doesn't look at the probability of Hezbollah intelligence that would lead it to avoid such a scenario where its prowess is put to test when it has a front with the Islamic State and Israel simultaneously. And second, and most importantly, in his very article, Levitt indirectly suggests that the US-led coalition its strikes were inefficient on ISIS, and they are meant to be that way so as to prompt Hezbollah for another intervention in Syria when convenient. And as to Israel, the article suggests that ISIS is a means to weaken Hezbollah and, so to say, put it at test, let alone an Israeli okaying of ISIS presence across its borders with no big military contingency in place at the Knesset, so as to deal with ISIS, which remains until now the elephant in the room. The Deutsche Welle writes an article about an interview President Assad gave to Paris Match, where Assad accused Turkey of continuing to provide direct support to the Islamic State. President Assad gave the rare interview on November the 28th in Damascus, his first in months. His comments were critical of Turkey, which denies the accusations, and US-led airstrikes appear intended to give the impression that his forces remain the most effective in fighting ISIS. You can't, the president said, you can't end terrorism with aerial strikes. Troops on the ground that know the land and can react are essential. US Secretary of State John Kerry contradicted Syria's president, although he too acknowledged there was much work to be done. Kerry was speaking at the beginning of a meeting of foreign officials in Brussels seeking to bring down the ISIS insurgency. He said, "We recognize the hard work that remains to be done." He said that Wednesday at the NATO headquarters, and he added, "Our commitment will be measured most likely in years, but our efforts are already having a significant impact." And in the rare media appearance, Syria's President Bashar al-Assad said that the US strikes would of course have helped had they been serious and efficient. But he added Assad's forces and the United States have not coordinated with one another in bombing ISIS in Syria. Officials from both factions claim that. And Assad said, "We are running the ground battles against Daesh, and we have noticed no change, especially with Turkey providing direct support to the region." He asserted Syria's opposition consists of terrorists rather than the moderates calling for freedom, and he says he can steer the country through the war, which has killed more than 200,000 people since a harsh government crackdown on peaceful opposition protests began in March 2011. And the president concluded, "The captain doesn't think about death or life, he thinks about saving his ship." That was it for today's brief analysis. For more updates, please visit us on Levant.tv. You could also subscribe to MidEast In Depth on iTunes. Thanks for watching and bye for now.